I've.
Welcome back to day 2 of the Venture Houston pitch competition. Semifinals yesterday included 3 tracks of 30 presentations. The judges have narrowed it down to 6 finalists and 1 wildcard presenter. Each company today will present for 5 minutes, followed by 10 minutes of Q&A from our panel of expert judges, which include Heath Butler of the Mercury Fund, Jim Cohen of Fitzgate Ventures, Joe Rempe of Montrose Lane, Krishna Srinivasan of Live Oak Ventures, Jeff Carnwright of Carnwright Ventures, Zaz Florini of Next Coast Ventures, and Diana Murakovskaya from the Artemis Fund. After the 7 companies present, we will take a quick networking break and the pitch competition prizes will be announced at 4:15 p.m. I hope you are all excited as I am today about day 2. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brad Burke of Rice Alliance, who will be emceeing the first 4 company pitches. Brad?
Stephanie, thanks. And it's great to partner with you on the final round of this competition. And it'll be exciting to see who wins the more than 1.7 million at the end of this. All right, I think that's really all I need to do to announce. Let's get started with the first of the 7 finalist pitches. The first company that will pitch this afternoon is Coda Health. So everyone, please help me welcome Tatiana Fofanova. Tatiana, welcome. If you will share your screen and put your presentation in slideshow mode.
It looks like you've disabled screen sharing.
Let's see. I think they can help you on the back end.
Perfect. Thank you. It's always fun being the first one up. A little nervous.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, can everyone see?
Looks good, and we can see you well.
Wonderful. Okay, think about your loved ones. Maybe your mom or your grandmother, probably folks that you haven't seen in a while. Do you know what kind of care they would want if they fell seriously ill? Most people think that they do, but actually the likelihood of you choosing what they would have wanted is less than 50%. And this is, of course, personally devastating for families. But this disconnect is also egregiously expensive for health systems and payers, which spend over $100 billion each year delivering care that people don't even want. Now, traditionally, planning for future healthcare has fallen to estate planning attorneys or to those folks that are proactive enough to pursue direct-to-consumer solutions. But these approaches often ignore the quality of a conversation. They cut doctors out of the process entirely, and well, frankly, they target people who can already afford it. But most Medicare beneficiaries live at or below the poverty line. It is the oldest and the poorest that are the highest utilizers of healthcare, and they don't have access to any of these sorts of solutions. And although 80% of patients want to speak to their doctor about this, only 7% actually have, because for doctors, it's more than just a lack of time. These conversations are difficult, requiring specialized training and documentation tools that they just don't have. At Koda, we knew we had to make this process easy, engaging, and accessible for everyone. So our patient-facing platform was co-created by palliative care physicians, medical ethicists, and patients as a way of empowering them to make more informed decisions. Koda is the only tool that digitally personalizes this conversation, a low-labor approach that makes it accessible and effective at scale through a patient's own doctor. And no other platform brings together a high-quality conversation and medical decision maker alignment into the legal process. Introduced by the provider, Koda does the conversational heavy lifting by delivering personalized, culturally relevant content that improves patient engagement tenfold. And as patients navigate it, their responses are organically captured to generate the necessary legal and medical documents they need to protect their choices. Documents they can access, share, and virtually notarize on our platform for free. So why now? This has always been a multi-billion-dollar problem, but the regulatory and reimbursement landscape didn't exist to support a solution of this kind until now. Medicare is rolling out sweeping initiatives in novel performance metrics and reimbursements that are specific to this conversation. And as a B2B solution, we help physicians cash in on these reimbursements, allowing us to offer it to patients for free, further driving engagement and cost savings for risk-bearing institutions like accountable care organizations. And because Medicare reimburses for anyone over the age of 65, At our price point, that's an annual revenue opportunity of over $3 billion. Now, to execute on this vision, our HIPAA-compliant beta is already live in fee-for-service clinics here in Houston. And our paid pilot with the Houston Methodist ACO is helping them navigate this conversation with their patients. And lastly, we've secured both investment and support from the world's largest payer organization through the Techstars United Healthcare Accelerator. And here we fleshed out our Medicare Advantage use case and significantly bulked out our sales pipeline. And our stakeholders are seeing a difference because when people engage in quality guided conversations, the metrics that matter go up. Our pilots have seen a 38-fold increase in proactive advanced care planning, with over 80% of patients identifying and sharing plans with their medical decision makers, all while generating a 3x ROI to the physicians. And people who've been meaning to get to it but haven't due to financial or time constraints are grateful for being able to stay in control of their healthcare journey. And honestly, we are also grateful because we have the Houston ecosystem to thank for it. My team of doctors, scientists, and engineers were recruited by the TMC Biodesign program to address this critical need in healthcare. And after 6 months of dedicated customer discovery, we've personally had hundreds of end-of-life conversations before ever writing a single line of code. Now, since incorporating less than 1 year ago, we've built out an MVP that's already legally protecting patients, formed commercial partnerships with healthcare giants, and raised an oversubscribed pre-seed to support our growth. And we're growing still. So we're looking for strategic partners that can help us expand quickly into new markets. So if this feels personal to you, and if this resonates with your skill set, we'd love to start a conversation. Thank you.
Tatiana, thank you very much. And so now I'll turn it over to the investor panel to ask questions.
I'll go ahead and take a stab. I'm just curious what the sales cycle looks like and to whom are you making the sale? Is it direct to doctors or is it to, for example, the hospital systems or Medicare?
Yeah, so we actually have 3 core customer types, each with a different sales cycle. Our first main customer type is primary care clinics and independent physician practices. Their sales cycles are actually quite short, so we can get our foot in the door pretty quickly. And for them, they're interested more of bringing something like this on as a way of generating additional revenue for their clinics. So with that 3x ROI, we can make enough money for them to bring on an additional medical assistant or nurse, for example. So it's really valuable. The second major customer class is risk-bearing systems like accountable care organizations and integrated delivery networks. For those folks, they are financially responsible for the care that they deliver. And so if it doesn't really work in their favor to throw everything in the kitchen sink at them. So they're really operating on a more of a cost savings model. And for them, that's obviously a much longer sales cycle that includes pilots. And then the longest sales cycle is the payer model, Medicare Advantage clinics and plans. We have relationships with all 3 groups, sort of waiting for them to appreciate at different rates.
So what do you get paid for here? Is the deliverable an advanced care directive? Is that what you get paid for? What's the price point for that? Or what's the revenue model look like for this business?
Yeah, it really, so the deliverable is dependent on the population. So we structure our pricing based on the complexity of the population. For a primary care clinic, for example, the patients are pretty healthy. This is a way of generating additional revenue for the clinic and introducing new ideas and concepts and communication lines between families and doctors. But for accountable care organizations that are working with more ill patients, for example, they're looking for the quality of the conversation, looping in that medical decision maker, which is utterly critical for them, and as well as the documentation that comes in for them. The interesting thing is, as a scientist, taking a look at the research in advanced care planning, studies show that it's not the document that drives value and cost savings for either families or hospitals. It's actually the engagement between the medical decision maker and the patient, because those documents aren't legally enforceable, they're protective. So if the first time the medical decision maker is seeing this document is at the emergency room, they can choose to ignore it and often do.
Tatiana, follow-on question to that. Value prop seems clear to your customers, but like actually, what are your price points? And can you walk us a little more granularly through what that means and what you make off a primary care office versus a larger client?
Yeah, absolutely. So primary care clinics are more like our foot in the door to test the platform, to really bring it in earlier. But I think our bread and butter are more on the Medicare Advantage clinics that are sort of doubly incentivized to get something like this in place because of cost savings and meeting new performance metrics from Medicare. So their bottom lines are really dependent on this. And for them, we structure in an implementation cost as well as a little bit of actuarial work looking into the complexity of their population, the notarization needs, which is the service arm of our SaaS business, in order to actually create our price points. And so, the margins that we make on Medicare Advantage clinic or an ACO are much larger than what we would make in a primary care clinic, for example. And our goal is over the next 5 years to actually diversify our revenue streams away from sales and into data. So we've gotten a lot of interest from payer organizations that are interested in the data we're collecting on values, quality of life, preferences, as a way of directing treatments throughout a person's life to the quality of life that they perceive, and using that as sort of an exit strategy for the future.
Can you, I think Zaza's question to follow up, can you be more precise about what do you expect to get paid per patient? Take an MA plan or whatever it is, right? Trying to get more granular there.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you can understand my hesitancy in case we decide to change our price point.
Of course, it's really a hypothesis at the stage, right? Just trying to get a sense for what is so it looks like, just to be clear, right, you're getting paid for just having a population under your management. It's not a physical deliverable like a formal advanced care directive.
It is.
But so trying to understand, what do you expect to get paid for that level of an engagement with these patients as a part of an MA plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we get paid for any patient that we enroll into the platform, any patient that engages with us. For some patients, they go all the way through and they need an advanced directive. Other patients don't. Upon the very first time they interact with the platform, their responses are captured in what we call a care plan. And that care plan is instantly delivered to the patient, the family member, and the physician. It might take a little longer to get to the notarization if that's what they want, but that way they always have a care plan in place and an idea of what a person's values and quality of life preferences might be. And on the actual pricing point, a lot of that is volume-based, for example, right? But the goal is for any patient that navigates this conversation with their family member and with a doctor is a cost savings between $9,000 and $15,000 on average, no matter what their preferences are, whether they choose comfort care or not comfort care, whether they finish the document or they don't finish the document. They see these massive cost savings. And so we try to price that at a point where they get a 10x ROI at minimum.
So are you looking to build your own sales organization to kind of go to market? Or are you thinking about channels? How are you going to market?
Yeah, so we're going to market through these various sort of steps, right? The primary care clinics, the ACOs. One thing that we actually need in order to expand our growth is additional experience and to round out our skill sets on the sales and marketing side of things. Because eventually, our warm contacts and our very many introductions will peter out. And so that's one thing that we are hoping to return to the market for a raise in the Q3 and Q4 of this year, to dedicate those funds primarily to building up a sales and marketing team in order to actually scale this nationally. We do have capacity to actually create these documents nationally now and multi-language functionality, but we do need additional processes in place in order to actually scale.
Tatiana, you mentioned that you provide them with culturally relevant content. And so can you expand on that a little bit and how the language comes into play with different populations, possibly not being English speakers, and kind of understanding those nuances? Is there any tech that comes into that, or is it human interaction?
A lot of it is, so we collect information that allows us to identify personas, right? So how does this person like to be communicated with? What kind of content do they like to see? Are they ready to engage in this conversation? What are their values, right? But one example I'll give you, so we're working with 2 organizations that are helping us structure in these different cultural competencies in the content that we deliver. In Hispanic culture, for example, there's a disconnect between who makes the decisions and who can make the decisions legally. Because in a lot of populations that we work with now, there's sort of the assumption that it is the eldest child that is making these clinical decisions, but legally that is not true. And so you face this sort of differential opposition. And so part of this culturally relevant content is addressing some of these differences in how people explore end-of-life care or serious illness, how they talk about it, and the kinds of assumptions that are frequently made. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Tatiana, maybe one last question. Where do you guys expect to be from a revenue standpoint at the end of this year? And how many customers would that represent?
Yes, so at the end of this past year, we've been incorporated for about 11 months now. We've made just shy of 10K in revenue. This coming year, we're still focusing on building and proving out our concept and really generating our data. But we are aiming for north of 100K in revenue by end of year. And that represents 4 small clinics and 2 mid-sized customers, 4 ACOs or MA clinics. And that's through pilots, not actual, on the primary care side, those are contracts, but on the ACO and MA clinic side, those are pilots because that is a really long sales cycle, as you say.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. I think we're out of time. Tatiana, thanks for presenting Coda Health this afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, thank you. All right, so we will proceed now to the second company that will be presenting in the final round this afternoon. So the second company is Spark Biomedical. And joining us is Daniel Powell. Daniel, we can see you. If you want to share your screen and unmute.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sounds good.
Right, sharing my screen.
Super. Judges, don't forget to make sure you think about scoring as we go along. We can see your screen.
All right. Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm Daniel Powell. I'm the co-founder of Spark Biomedical. We're the developer of the Sparrow therapy system, which is an FDA-approved wearable neurostimulation solution, clinically proven to manage opioid withdrawal in both adults and babies. To be clear, only the adult product is approved at this time. We have a management team with a combined 150 years of specifically neurostimulation and medical device experience. No, there's no lack of awareness that we have an opioid epidemic in America. It's been a little overshadowed by the pandemic the last year, but there is over 11.5 million Americans either dependent or fully addicted to opioids. And that would be anything from pills to heroin to Vicodin to methadone to fentanyl. And we kind of see this market in 2 classes. You have people diagnosed with opioid use disorder that are seen by an addiction specialist, hopefully, that are fully addicted to a point they consume opioids to self-harm. There's actually about 5 times the number of people in America, adults in America, that are physically dependent on high doses of opioids that have been legitimately prescribed by the doctors, and they cannot get off the prescription. Didn't even know this when I started this company, but my mom is one of these patients. She's been on methadone for 17 years for Lyme disease. It doesn't even work for Lyme disease, but she cannot stop taking the medication or she'll go through horrible, debilitating withdrawal. Sadly, in addition to those numbers, there's 35,000 babies born into dependency on opioids every year, and they go through a horrible 20 to 30 day stay in the NICU while they are detoxed on a slow morphine taper. So we built the Sparrow system to address this problem in our nation. It's a neurostimulation device worn on the ear with a daily disposable earpiece and a battery-powered generator, and then controlled by a clinician app. In our clinical data, it's important to understand why withdrawal is such an issue with opioids. On the right side of the screen here, opioids rewire the functional and structural form of the brain and how it functions. It creates improper balances in the amygdala where we process fear and pain, and it creates imbalance in our reward system. By putting neurostimulation on these auricular branches around the ear, we drive the brain back into its original state to produce its own natural endorphins and able to satiate the withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal is measured on a system called the COWS scale, the Clinical Opioid Withdrawal Scale. And upon putting our device on in a fully randomized controlled trial performed right here in Austin, Texas, we saw a 53% reduction in the patient's opioid withdrawal scale, essentially moving everybody from moderate to mild withdrawal. And 1 out of 3 patients in 60 minutes had no clinical withdrawal symptoms displayed. More importantly is what happened in day 2 and 3 when withdrawal would normally go up precipitously, that we maintained the control over the withdrawal through the entire detox process. And ending on day 5, which is a typical time to go through a full detox, still controlling all withdrawal symptoms. Really interesting, this is 93% of the patients post-acute detox went on to further clinical treatment for their addiction, which is an abnormally high number. We also have a baby product that we have clinically trialed in 8 babies and received FDA breakthrough designation. This was done at MUSC. We reduced the average NICU stay for tapering the opioids from 23 days to 7.5 days. At $5,000 a day in the NICU, the cost of that bed, significant savings to the hospital. So real quick to sum up, we have a fully developed product. We were FDA cleared January 2nd, creating a great start to 2021. We have breakthrough designation on the baby, and then full FDA clearance on the adult product. Have already had our first 2 sites and 3 patients treated commercially. And we're starting a long-term addiction study to study the effects of helping people overcome addiction post withdrawal that will begin here next month. We have an open round that's a convertible note. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Daniel. And we'll turn it over to our panel now for 10 minutes of questions. You can, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel. Great presentation. Can you walk us through your planned funding cycles, over the next 12 to 24 months?
Sure. This convertible note, actually, we were going to raise 3.5 million and it filled up in 6 days post FDA clearance. So we've extended it another million. This should be enough money to get us close to the end of the year. It gets us close to cash flow positive. Of course, everything since I started this company has cost more money and taken longer than I planned. So we do anticipate it's a reasonable expectation that there's another round post this note, maybe between 2 and 5 million. And we might be able to debt finance that and not have any further dilution. So it is over the next 6 months, how well we prove out the business model. But we control expenses really carefully.
Can you talk about what industry or clinician validation do you have for this? Is there anything to do with the outcomes that you can talk about, or when will you get to know that level of feedback with respect to the way as you all go take it to market?
Sure. So we have a lot of data on the medications available for withdrawal, going through detox and long-term outcomes. From a clinical meaningfulness perspective, 15% reduction in a withdrawal is considered meaningful. There's one and only one medication on the market, Lucemira, that is a non-opioid to reduce withdrawal. They they had about a 15% reduction per day, whereas we're having a 53% reduction in one single hour. So it's a much more dramatic effect than the best pharmaceutical. And by the way, that drug costs about $1,500 a week to administer. Also, what we noted is 93% of the patients exiting the study went on to continue addiction treatment. That is well north of the norm, which is probably less than 50%. And our desire is to continue to advance the science, and that's why we're going to run this long-term addiction study where we use the neurostimulator every day for like an hour. And we're going to study if we can help cravings, depression, and anxiety, which we know we have anxiety based on the current data, and help actually bend the curve of addiction recovery. So that's our next step as we look at taking the same patient from 7 days or 5 days to 6 months of treatment.
Can I ask a question about the note? Am I remembering it correctly? Do you have a 50 million cap on the note?
Yes.
Maybe you could speak to how you came up with that cap and ultimately what kind of return you expect investors in the note to be able to achieve. And then the second part of the question is, you mentioned somewhere that you and your team have previously brought to market 15 products. I'm curious what kind of return your investors got on those products as well.
Good. We brought products to market under big corporations before, not as a startup, so I don't have that data point. But our last round, we bought back some stock and sold it for common stock and sold it for a 25 million pre-money valuation. Sold about $700,000-800,000 worth of that. It was just we bought it back from some people that we had issued it to that didn't perform. So that gave us kind of a range where we were on this. If we look at comps and wearable neurostimulation, there's not a lot. But the last company that had a major round was Coda Health. They raised 50 million at 150 million pre-roundabout after their FDA clearance when they had a couple hundred units of sales. I think that's a really high valuation that didn't seem reasonable. So we kind of found this middle ground and then worked it out with our lead investors, and they were comfortable with the opportunity. As for return, industry standard for us is somewhere between 6 and 10 times revenue. If we build this north of 50 million, which we plan to go far north of that with indications and opportunities and just the vast patient population, at a decent return, you pick the number you think it would exit at between 6 and 10x revenue. It should be a very good return. I like it if our investors make a really good return. That'd make us all happy.
Okay,
Daniel,
thank
can you tell us who your current investors are?
Actually, we're all Aggie Angel Network and a few other angels here in Houston put money in. Our lead investor is actually an international distributor. Nobody would know him. He's deep in neurostimulation in Europe and owns a class 3 implantable neurostimulation company. And the vast majority of today has been people in the industry. Even my old CEO put in multiple 6 figures in the previous rounds, which is a real testament to their belief in what we're doing.
Daniel, can you talk a little bit about the unit economics for each device? And do you guys manufacture them yourselves, or do you partner with manufacturers to assemble the product? Can you just maybe talk about that a little bit? And if you see with your guys' forecasted growth, if there'd be any manufacturing bottlenecks?
The earpiece is going to be the manufacturing bottleneck if it happens, if we go from 7 per patient to 180. So we're already looking at that. So we did outsource manufacturing to medical device manufacturers. In fact, the majority of the unit logistics is in Katy at a company called Valentium. They handle the final assembly, pick, pack, and ship, QC and validation on the line. The earpieces come from a very specialized company called High Tech out of Orange County. They straddle Tijuana and Orange County for cost controls. We're actually doing a 1.5 version of the system, what I'm calling right now, fully designed for scalability and mass manufacturing. And the reason we did outsource manufacturing is the amount of money we would have had to raise and the amount of infrastructure to have a qualified manufacturing facility. There's just at this stage, it just makes much more financial sense and a better return on your investment for us to outsource it And then when the day makes sense, we can start to insource. But I would expect that several years away. We picked good scalable manufacturers. In fact, the company that makes the earpiece makes the iRhythm, the heart monitor. They make 30,000 of those a week. So and they make for Johnson & Johnson and Baxter and a bunch of big companies. So they're sound.
Okay. And can you talk about the unit economics too? Sorry if I missed that.
Oh, I missed it. So we're targeting an ASP around 1,500 to 2,000, and we're well below 400 on total cost of goods sold. The real win comes when we're going to get the cost down further. We're about $10 a unit on the earpiece. We need it sub 3. And that's our vision for when you really scale this out. The business is in the disposable earpiece.
When do you get to actual commercial shipment of these devices, and what else needs to happen for you to get to that state?
We shipped our first commercial unit 2 weeks ago and have treated our first commercial patients. We're doing a real careful limited commercial release, walking before we run. We made sure we had money and didn't overhire in sales and marketing and everything. So we're working the system, and we're going to work the system carefully for about 4 months, work out any kinks. As you mentioned, it's the first time this company's ever shipped a product. So we're just making sure everything works. Like I said, there's always a surprise. I'd be lying if you didn't, on day one, it was like, how do you unlock the iPod? It was, those things happen. So that's our plan. We're really set to scale up second half of the year.
That's when doctors would prescribe this device and stuff like that for people?
Yep. Yeah, but they're prescribing now. We've already onboarded our first clinics. In fact, our first big behavioral health clinic is the premier behavioral health clinic in the nation. It's called Sierra Tucson. It's in Tucson. It's where the richest of the rich go. It's very prestigious. So we're really happy we're opening that in the next couple of weeks.
Adding on to that, what do you guys view as your biggest risk with that ramp up now that you guys are going commercial?
I think that's a good question. I think it's just managing expectations, not growing too quick or not over promising, then failing to deliver and mess up our reputation. Like I said, we've been fiscally conservative up to now. We don't overhire. We don't have a big fancy building. We actually built this all from remote virtual offices. And so it's putting together that infrastructure so that it scales and we don't start to, typical thing, get over our skis and too quickly.
Okay, I think our time is just about up. Daniel, thanks for presenting Spark Biomedical this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, we are now on to our third of the 7 companies that will present this afternoon. The third company up is Pathx and Sinead Miller. Sinead, good to see you again.
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Excellent. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Please do. You'll share your screen and then you can start when you're ready.
Excellent, thank you. Give me 1 second here.
Yep, sure thing. Yep, we can see your screen. You want to put that in slideshow mode? Yep, there you go.
Perfect, okay. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say we're really honored to be here and we're excited to share more with you about Pathx. At Pathx, our mission is to purify life through the treatment of sepsis. We've developed the first and only breakthrough device proven to capture and remove over 99% of bacteria and endotoxins directly from a patient's bloodstream, regardless of bacteria type or even drug resistance for the treatment of sepsis. So right now, sepsis is the leading cause of death in our ICUs, and it's associated with the highest patient treatment costs, costing the US healthcare system over $24 billion per year. If you or I were in the ICU with sepsis, we would have a 38% chance of dying. And this is really due to a number of factors. First, current antibiotic treatments are failing us with the rise of drug resistance and new emerging pathogens. And secondly, due to past failures and really high developmental costs, no new antibiotics or drugs have recently been developed to help these patients. And it's very clear that a new alternative treatment option is desperately needed. At Pathx, we're helping to solve these problems with our proprietary medical device, CycloPE, which is proven to capture and remove bacteria and endotoxins directly from a patient's bloodstream with nearly 100% efficiency in a single pass. We've designed CycloPE to fit into already existing hospital blood pumps and hemodialysis systems. A patient is connected to CycloPE in the ICU, and the patient's infected blood is continuously circulated through our device. In there, we utilize a hollow helical channel combined with inertial forces to specifically focus the bacteria along the channel walls of the device. In there, the bacteria are bound and captured utilizing our proprietary coating that's functionalized along the walls of the channel themselves. And then we can flow the clean blood back into the patient using a method very similar to hemodialysis. We've proven in multiple large animal studies that our device has a very high bacterial capture efficiency. And we've also been able to prove that the bacterial capture capacity of a single device is 3 orders of magnitude greater than the bacterial load that you'd ever see in even the most severely septic patient. And additionally, we've proven in multiple large animal safety studies that our device has no negative effect on your healthy blood cell components. Now, so far, with the help of Wilson Sonsini, we've filed 2 non-provisional patent applications worldwide, covering both the channel design and the functionalized coating itself. Our device, CycloPE, is a single-use disposable cartridge that we know can be manufactured for less than $50 per device at scale. And market research and competitor pricing dictates that we'll be able to sell this device for over $4,000 per cartridge. Due to the high capture efficiency of the device and its really broad application, we know that we'll be able to reduce patient length of stay, minimize the use of ineffective antibiotic treatments, and most importantly, offer a life-saving alternative treatment option for patients that really have little to no alternatives right now. Now, we do have competitors, we're aware of them. Competing technologies include tormycin, Serap, Cytosorb. All of these technologies are devices that are straight column filters that use porous bead absorption methods to try to capture and remove secondary effects of sepsis and infection like cytokines or other inflammatory mediators. But none of these devices effectively treat the root cause of sepsis itself, which is the bacteria. And none of these devices have achieved FDA approval. They've all been cited for things like poor efficiency, clogging, ineffectiveness, and prolonged treatment time. And that's where the Pathx device really excels. We've overcome all of these clinical issues, and our device fits into complementary hemodialysis systems already made by Fresenius and Baxter. My name's Sinead Miller. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Pathx and the inventor of our technology. This is my co-founder, Alex Wiesler, who is the director of finance for a startup bionutraceutical company that was purchased in 2014. And he and I are supported by a leading team of experts in infectious disease, engineering, business operations, such as Jamie Dwyer, who's currently the director of Vanderbilt's Nephrology Clinical Trial Center, and Dana Deerdorf, who has over 20 years of experience in the medical device industry. We founded Pathx 3 years ago, and since then we've received phase 1 and phase 2 grants and SBIR grants from the National Science Foundation. We moved the company to Houston in 2019 to be part of this great ecosystem. We received breakthrough device designation from the FDA and successfully completed 2 rounds of large animal studies, the most recent of which was supported by Fresenius. We're now raising $5 million to help us complete our preclinical studies and our 15-patient first-in-human safety study. Again, we're Pathx, and we believe we can change the paradigm of sepsis treatment for the better. Thank you.
Brad, you're muted.
Yep, I noticed. Sinead, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Now I'll turn over to the panel.
I'm curious what the success rate is with this device compared to current medications that are being used or other devices, because you said that 38% of the people who get sepsis suffer a fatality. So how does your device improve those odds?
Well, just to be clear, 38% suffer a fatality that are in the ICU. So I just want to make that clear. And I also want to clarify, that we haven't done human clinical trials yet. We've done large animal efficacy studies and large animal safety studies. In those, we have clearly proven that the large animals that are septic and then treated with our device fare much better than obviously the control animals. We've proven that we completely remove 100% of all the bacteria from the bloodstream, which obviously improves the overall outcome. But we have not completed first in human studies yet. That's what we're planning to do with the Series A funding that we're raising now. But I want to clarify too that our device is really novel and unique, that you don't even need to know what bacteria the patient's infected with to use it, because it's nearly 100% efficient at removing bacteria regardless of bacteria type. And so you don't even need to ID the bacteria before treatment, basically.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So would the main use case or starting point be once they've hit the ICU and have sepsis, or is there sort of something that happens along the way in that like bacteria that then converts into it? And how do you guys view that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just broadly, there's a few different stages of sepsis, and we know from current research that the earlier that you could use our device, the better, right? Earlier treatment, the better the patient's going to do. However, we know also that early on, whenever we're doing our clinical studies, we're going to need to start with patients that have bacteremia or have sepsis. So our first target market will be patients with catheter-associated bloodstream infections or hemodialysis patients that have bacteremia or sepsis. There's about 125,000 per year just in the US. So, with our device, say it sells for $4,000 per cartridge, we're looking at about a $500 million initial target market. But that will be like the first step. Once we prove out clinical efficacy there, we really want to see the device used earlier, because that's, it would just have such more impact and everything, but we do need to prove it early on, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Great presentation. Can you walk us through the timeline between now, let's assume you raise this round, and how long it takes to get through whatever trials you need and then to market with something?
Yeah, great question. I'm just going to pop my slide up here really quick so I can show that. So we do have, it is a class 3 medical device. We require a PMA. So with that being said, what we're planning on now for timeline wise is we would like to close our funding round early this year, the Series A round. It would allow us to complete our final GLP safety study this year. And then next year in 2022, we would be able to complete our first in human safety study, 15 patient first in human safety study done by the end of 2022. Talking with potential strategics like Fresenius, we don't believe an acquisition would happen then. We believe an acquisition would be more probable once we get into the pivotal study, which would begin in 2023. And once we get some early data in that pivotal study that's obviously needs to be successful, which we believe it will be, then that's when we would see a more probable acquisition happening then for Pathx.
So is the thinking then that you guys would go out and raise a Series B around the time you're commercializing, like at the end of 2022 or early in 2023? Is that what you think?
Yeah, so we've had a relationship with some strategics, including Fresenius, which has kind of helped us determine our timeline and everything. So we're raising this $5 million now. It'll get us through the first in human study, and then we'll need to raise a Series B for about $20 million, and that will be once we're done and have our data complete for the first in human study. So then we'll have some time, raise that Series B for $20 million, and then jump right into the pivotal study.
Okay. And another question I had too was around using the device itself in the ICU. Is there a risk of like using it on a patient that is too sick at some point? And are there any adverse effects of that potentially happening?
So we haven't tested on humans yet. I just want to make that clear. But what I can say is that we've been able to show in animal studies that our device, for example, if an animal is severely septic, if its mean arterial pressure is plummeting, even whenever you connect that patient to our device, we've been able to show that our device improves mean arterial pressure. It improves all the animal's blood cell counts, fever, all those sort of things that you would look at and kind of be concerned about maybe with a patient that is very sick and then hooking them up to a device like ours. We know from what we've seen in animal studies that it really actually does help things like mean arterial pressure, which would be a primary endpoint that you'd look at there.
What's the addressable market at your level for this product? How many units could, is there an opportunity and what price points? And is there a proxy for it with others selling into this market for hemodialysis, et cetera, that would use to substantiate it?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So like I was saying earlier, I think Diana asked the question, initial target market, 125,000 patients, catheter-related bloodstream infections in the ICU, that's about $500 million. But the total addressable market is, just in the US, there's 1.7 million sepsis patients per year, which would equate to a $6.8 billion market. But I do want to say that we have designed this device to plug and play into already existing hemodialysis machines, because the second leading cause of death in chronic hemodialysis patients is sepsis or bacteremia. And our device can be used in series with already existing hemodialysis machines and hemodialysis cartridges. So that is another opportunity that we could potentially tackle down the road, is using our device on hemodialysis patients, but also maybe using it as a preventative, since bloodstream infections are so common in those patients. But that's something we're going to need to prove out with clinical studies as we move forward.
Have you had any experiences with sort of repeat need on the same animals or anything like that? I guess as you think about moving to humans, would it always be a one-time use and they won't need to use it again, or what's been the experience with animals?
Yeah, with the experience with animals so far, we've been really focused on proving efficacy of capture and also safety. We have a lot of guidance from the FDA because we have breakthrough device designation. So they've really helped us mold and design our study protocols. So that's been great. But the device it captures and removes 100% of the bacteria from the blood, the entire bloodstream. So 5 liters of blood within 1 hour. So really the device should only need to be used that one time, that one treatment. However, if you needed to use it the next day or, the day after that, you could use it again. You wouldn't be inhibited from doing that. But the device is designed, it's very effective. And so far we've, seen the need that it just is that one-time treatment, and then the bloodstream infection is completely clear.
Just to clarify, are you may have mentioned this before, but is your plan to actually have a go-to-market? Because I have some questions about the go-to-market, or are you also planning sort of a parallel path to selling to a strategic at a certain point before you have to go to market? Because obviously going to market and selling in the hospital systems is, you've got to kind of build up a team, raise more money. Yeah. How are you thinking about it? And if you are thinking of selling strategic before you go to market, who are the likely, is it Medtronics? I mean, who are the likely buyers?
Yeah, great question. I want to start by saying, we really do believe in this technology and we really want to see it go to market and help patients. So we're going to do whatever we need to do to make that happen. We do have a partnership formed with Fresenius. We worked with Fresenius to complete our animal safety studies. So they supported us with that, and they would be a potential strategic. But we do, 85% of companies like ours are acquired before they IPO. So there's a high probability that we would be, but we're operating the company and raising money like we would get to the IPO standpoint. But we do think that we'll probably be acquired within that pivotal study range.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Super, Sinead, I think we are just about out of time. Thank you very much for presenting Pathx this afternoon.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Great, thank you again. And judges, don't forget to be, as we go through the company presentations, to be filling out your scores as we go. And so now we'll introduce the fourth company that's going to present this afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Krubiner with Conversifi. Stephen, I see you.
Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen.
Great. We can hear you well.
Excellent. Can you see my screen now?
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay, terrific. So my name is Steve Krubiner. I'm the founder and CEO of Conversifi. And along with my co-founder, Kate Liberti, I want to thank you all for your time and consideration this afternoon. Let me quickly introduce myself. My background is actually in international conflict resolution and cross-cultural communication. I spent 15 years working on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And one of the common themes throughout my career has been the impact that speaking another language has on breaking down barriers and building bridges. I've also had tremendous opportunities myself because of the languages I've learned. For example, in 2006, my colleague came into my office in Jerusalem and said, "Hey, Steve, we need you to go to Madrid for 6 months. The King of Spain and the Spanish Foreign Ministry are hosting an Arab-Israeli peace conference, and we're coordinating it. You're the only one on the team who speaks Spanish, Hebrew, Arabic, and English, so you'll run point." It turned out to be one of the most pivotal moments in my career. Speaking other languages opens doors for people around the world. It creates social mobility, and it brings us together. By helping people learn a language at Conversifi, our mission is to connect the world in conversation. Now, some of you who are familiar with language learning may be thinking to yourselves right now that the language learning space is really crowded with tons of players. Why do we need another language company? What's the problem? The problem is that learners are spending $90 billion a year to learn another language, but the industry is failing to deliver what they really want and what they're paying for, which is the ability to speak the language. Why? Because it's impossible to become conversational in another language without practicing with native speakers. So what we're doing with Conversifi is entering a crowded market and turning that into an advantage for us. Our go-to-market strategy is integrating with and enhancing the value of the rest of the players in our space and growing through B2B2C channel partnerships with them. Conversifi connects language learners with native speakers for on-demand language practice and cultural exchange over video chat. Learners search for a native speaking coach by selecting a language, a topic, and a country, and our matching algorithm then finds them the best available match. We provide the native speaker with prompts to keep the conversation at the right level for the learner, as well as on the right topic. These modules are what enable us to easily complement our partners' curricula because they match to the vocabulary, grammar, and themes that our partners use. The modules are also a big differentiator between us and our competition because they enable us to maintain a higher quality of conversation while also making it easy for us to scale. The sessions are recorded, which give users the chance to review their progress over time, and which gives us several natural language processing data opportunities down the road. We decided to seed our platform in higher ed, where universities build Conversifi into their curriculum as a credit-bearing requirement. Higher ed is a smart beachhead for us for several reasons. As a platform, we can lock in our demand side and forecast how many students we'll have per semester, and then focus on matching that on the supply side. Speaking of the supply side, we can also have university students who are learning on Conversifi serve as coaches in their native language. So if you're studying Spanish at UT and using Conversifi, you can also work for us as an English-speaking coach and help students at a university in Mexico, for example. There are also great channel partners within higher ed and relatively little competition, none of which is set up to scale the way we are. There are 3 trends that make now a terrific moment for Conversifi. First, advances in video chat technology make connecting face-to-face easier than ever. Today is a perfect example of that. Second, COVID has accelerated the urgency of online education and created a spike in our demand. Conversifi is a solution that complements both in-person and virtual language learning, making us pandemic-proof. Third, the emergence of sharing economies and on-demand solutions make Conversifi more relevant than ever. To date, we've had over 100 universities build Conversifi into their curricula, including UT Austin, UT San Antonio, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, the University of Dallas, and Texas State. We're expecting to have had 165 universities by the end of this year. We've had over 100,000 sessions already with 30,000 lifetime users. Last year, we did around 375,000 in recognized revenues, and we're looking to grow that to 840,000 this year. We are currently partnering with 2 of the top 4 publishers in foreign language in the United States, Pearson and Cengage, and we're working with the top 2 distributors of digital content, RedShelf and VitalSource, to make access codes available to students through their bookstores, as well as to have Conversifi charged directly to students' tuition, including using financial aid to cover the cost. We're about to raise a seed round of funding to help us solve our biggest problem, keeping up with the current demand. It will also help us grow our integration capabilities as we look to grow beyond higher ed. We're looking for smart partners who want to join us on this exciting journey. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Super, thanks. Steve, thanks so much. And now I'll turn it over to the panel.
Hey, Steve, how do you find, screen, and compensate the native language speakers?
Great question. So the way that we find them initially has been by offering the university partners that we work with the opportunity to allow students to coach if they want. And that sort of is the beginning of the funnel. If they want to be coaches with us, they need to watch a coaching training video and then take a quiz, which demonstrates to us that they've actually watched the video and digested what it means to be a coach. And then after every session, there's two-way peer feedback. So if I'm the learner, I'm going to give you feedback as the coach. If you're the coach, you're going to give me feedback as the learner. And that feedback goes into our matching algorithm, and coaches that get lower ratings, will automatically get weeded out of the cycle. The other thing that we do to help protect the quality of our calls is everything is recorded. And so if there's any reason for us to check those recordings to make sure that they meet the quality that we're expecting, we can always do that. And so that's a really nice way for us to make sure for ourselves, but also I think it keeps the coaches on their toes a bit, knowing that those sessions are recorded, that they really need to do a good job. Lastly, the way that we help keep quality high is by having those language immersion modules, the prompts in front of the coach. It ensures that the coach doesn't just do whatever they want on the session, that they have some guidance in terms of what we're expecting, which keeps it at the right level for the learner and on the right topic, but also at the right quality.
Great. And what about the compensation? Sorry.
Great, compensation. So most of our students who are using Conversifi will coach in order to earn in-app credit. So if I'm coaching English, I'll earn in-app credit that I can apply toward my sessions in Spanish or French. However, we also do have a higher caliber coach, which is a paid coach, that can cash that credit out for money. And they need to go through another hoop, which is they have to have coached a minimum number of sessions, and we watch videos to just make sure that they actually really do meet a very high quality standard for us before we allow them to get paid for cash.
So what's the full business model, and you just continue on with the economics of the company?
Absolutely. So and this also goes into sort of the market. So even though we started in higher ed, which has traditionally really long sales cycles, we decided to avoid all those sales cycles by starting with a student pay model. So in the university system, what generally happens is a student signs up for a course, a Spanish course, and the teacher says, okay, for this course, you need to buy this textbook and you need to get a Conversifi, account. On Conversifi, they pay an access fee per semester, and then they can either buy a bundle of sessions, in which case it would include the access fee, or they can pay per session. The average American student last semester spent about $35 for the semester. So you're looking at, in most cases, where it's a traditional 2-semester course, they spend about $70 with Conversifi.
Can you talk?
There are a few other ways that we get paid, but that's sort of the main path.
Can you talk a little bit more about how, what does success look like, and how many sessions does a student actually need to take until they hit whatever the milestone is on the language?
Yeah. So one of the best things that I think we're selling is the experience that you get when you speak another language with a native speaker, the adrenaline rush, the confidence boost that you get. And we see that start to really happen after 4 sessions. So what we require in our university partners is that they build in a minimum of 6 sessions so that we know we've gotten over that hump, and students are going to leave feeling really good and like they want to continue. And that also for us sort of is the point where they want to keep going because they get that adrenaline rush and that confidence boost. And so then we start seeing students do way more than they're even required to do. The average university is building in between 6 and 10 sessions. We have some that are building in many more than that. But it's between 6 and 10 is sort of the sweet spot right now per semester. That's actually the same number that they're building in quarter school. So like at UCLA, you see, even though it's a quarter school, you see the same number being built in. So that's really per course, I'd say, actually, as opposed to per semester or quarter.
So are you marketing to students at all directly to acquire for demand purpose or supply? Or it's all through universities, and you just go to pitch to faculty and then they just help sign up both the students for demand and supply side?
Yeah, on the demand side, it's all through the universities. Our growth model is a B2B2C sort of channel partnership. So at this point, some of those partners are the universities. Some of them are the textbook publishers who are marketing Conversifi to the universities for us. But we're not doing any direct marketing on the demand side. We're doing a little bit of direct marketing on the supply side. Just to, we just launched French. So before we went out with French, we wanted to make sure we had some coaches already available. So we did a little bit of advanced, outreach. But in general, we're not going direct right now at all in terms of students.
And so how do you protect defensibility here? What if, Duolingo just comes in and says, let me also provide the same offering here. You don't control either demand or supply directly.
Was your example Duolingo?
Yeah, somebody like that. I mean, you're plugging into all of these players, right? What if one of these players who offer many other modules just wants to go direct to these faculty and say, hey, I can do this?
Yep. So Duolingo and most of the language companies are really software companies, right? They've built a really nice, curriculum that you play with on a software tool. Conversifi is a platform company, and to move from a software company to a platform company that's matching in real time, real people is pretty difficult. The hardest thing that we do is manage the equilibrium on Conversifi, making sure that coaches don't have a lot of downtime and learners don't have wait time. And that's not easy. And it's not something that any of the partners that we've talked to so far, and we've spoken to many of the folks outside of higher ed as well, it's not something that any of them are looking to add to their suite of offering in terms of building it themselves. Many of them definitely see the value in acquiring this kind of service, but they're not going to build it themselves. So that's one form of defensibility. Another is just the learning that we've done in terms of being able to build, again, that platform equilibrium management. Some of that is through machine, and some of that is through human management and human learning, and that takes time to learn. And our curriculum. So we have over 150 modules now where we've learned how coaches can best sight coach. And what I mean by sight coaching is if you take the concept in music of sight reading music, where you can just sit down and play a piece of music, that's what we're going for with sight coaching, where we want our coaches to be able to have it pop up on their screen that they're about to talk about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in their hometown. And we have the prompts there that they can just jump right in and have that conversation. And that also takes a little bit of learning. And so no one else is doing that. And I think it would take a long time for them to catch up. There are some technical capabilities and complexities as well. But what I've listed so far are really the main moats that we have.
Steve, can you tell us a bit about your team and where you plan to grow it and who you need to fill it?
Sure. Our team consists of myself and my co-founder. Kate has a long background running massive tech projects at Fortune 500 companies. But before she got into any of that, she was a language teacher. And she's obsessed with languages and has learned 5 languages herself. So we both bring the language aspect, but she sort of brings the technical side. Our tech team are all down in Argentina. And so we have a 5-person tech team. And then we have 2 other people who are working full-time with us. One is a college student, one is a recent grad, one in Spain and one here in the States. What we really, really need to do is to try to keep up with current demand. We can't do enough sales and account management with our current team. And especially with COVID, there's a lot more demand than we were even anticipating. And so we need to grow on the sales side. And just to go back to my earlier point, the sales side isn't necessarily even for us direct outreach to the universities. We want to be reaching out more directly to our channel partners and getting our channel partners equipped for their sales team and their marketing team to also help us grow much faster and scale this thing as quickly as possible so we can really win higher ed and move beyond it. We are a distributed team, which made the transition into COVID times much easier, and we probably will remain distributed. So I'm in Houston, Kate's in Connecticut, Powell is in Spain, the tech team's in Argentina. So we're in different places.
I'm sort of intrigued by the go-to-market that's focused on the universities, because it seems like you're unnecessarily restricting your potential sales growth, because your customer base also on a university campus has already got access to world-class educators and language classes. And if you look at the users of the other online competitors, it's obviously a much broader demographic. So what is your plan ultimately to go beyond the university setting and go direct to consumer? And if that is your plan, which it seems like it should be, you're going to require a lot more capital.
So there are a lot of reasons that we started in higher ed, just to list a few really quickly. Again, in terms of equilibrium management, we can control the supply and demand much easier as we learn the dynamics about how do we keep that equilibrium in check. It's much easier to do that when a student is in a course and sort of captive on one side of our equation, so that we can really figure that out and get it right. It also brings a little bit of academic credibility to us as we expand, to be able to say that we came out of the university ecosystem and we're in hundreds of universities, and the channel partners and the competition are advantageous to us in higher ed. However, we absolutely plan to move beyond higher ed. Higher ed, by the way, in and of itself represents $1 billion opportunity for us. But we do plan to move beyond it, but probably not going direct to consumer in the traditional model. It will still be partnering with, going after big partnerships with some of the big apps, and providing them and their users with an on-demand chat with native speaker offering that complements, if you go on Duolingo and you do the first 5 sessions on family and friends, then you can go on to Conversifi and do the session that complements that Duolingo unit, and just keep going and reinforcing that. So if we go through those channel partners, we think we can both grow much, much faster, but also we're not coming into a competitive, with a competitive approach, we're coming in to actually enhance this $90 billion industry. Right. And we are already in conversation with some of those big players, and there is interest. So.
Thanks. Time's up. Thanks for presenting Conversifi this afternoon.
Thanks so much. Thank you all. And this has been a terrific, organized, and fantastic event. So thanks so much.
Terrific. And now I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Thanks, Brad. So we're down to the final 3 pitches for today. Really excited about this next group. So next up, we've got Daniel Meyer of CellChorus. Hi, Daniel. I just saw you pop in.
Hello.
Please go ahead and start sharing your screen. There we go. All right, the timer's on. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Meyer, the CEO of CellChorus. We're a University of Houston spinout that merges advances in physical, biological, and information sciences for the life science industry. So many of the new and most effective therapies that are being developed today are cell-based. Antibodies, T cells, and other immunotherapies, they're different from traditional drugs, and so they require techniques that evaluate thousands of individual cells to develop and manufacture the best therapies, and importantly, to predict response. And while there have been a number of significant advances in single cell analysis in recent years, there remains a really big gap in evaluating the dynamics of individual cells. And this is particularly true at scale. So there's 2 things to keep in mind. The first is that cells are always changing. So they need to move, they need to interact in order to perform. And the second thing is that in a given population of cells, there are going to be differences between those cells. And so it's not sufficient to evaluate a small number of cells over time, and it's not sufficient to evaluate a large number of cells in bulk. We need to evaluate a large number of cells individually. And CellChorus gives the life science industry a more comprehensive understanding of what their cells are doing, how they're performing, and which ones are performing best and why. And the way that we do that is we place thousands of individual therapeutic and disease cells on our chips. And each of those have on the order of 10,000 wells on them. Each of those wells the size of a human hair. So we capture images at regular intervals and then make movies of each well. So in frame B, you'll see on the left 3 cancer cells that are marked red and 1 therapeutic T cell. And at a later time point, you're going to see 2 of those cancer cells are lighting up a bright pink or a bright purple. And that indicates that they've undergone cell death. So the T cell has moved, has come into contact with the cells, and has done its job. And so these are 2 frames from a movie of 1 well. And we're going to make a movie of that well, and we're going to make a movie of thousands of other wells. Now, it doesn't make sense for us to watch these manually. One way to think about this is that Netflix has about 13,000 licensed titles in its whole catalog, and we've got about the same number of movies we can make from a chip. So we're not going to hire 100 PhDs to watch 1,000 movies and then get together and talk about what they saw. It doesn't make sense. Instead, we apply artificial intelligence to watch the movies for us. And this allows us to evaluate groups of cells. It allows us to identify individual cells of interest. And importantly, we can grab those cells because they're still alive at the end for downstream analysis. So the platform is well validated both scientifically and commercially. It's been featured in more than 15 peer-reviewed publications across a variety of cell types. And we have 2 early access customers that are large public biopharma companies with cell therapies either in development or on the market. Our biggest challenge for them right now is that we don't have enough capacity to expand revenues and do more work with them, which is a key capital need for us. And we take a comprehensive approach to intellectual property. So we've licensed 2 patents exclusively from the University of Houston, one of which issued this summer. And at least as important, we have trade secrets, know-how, and experience applying the algorithms to these cell types that are highly different. This is highly differentiating relative to anyone else in the market. So we exist in the cell analysis market. It's a large growing market with market leaders that acquire for growth. And importantly, the single cell segment of that market is a majority of the growth and growing 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the cell analysis market. So I've spent most of my career in healthcare and life sciences, most recently as the COO and a board member of Genospace, a company acquired by HCA, which is the largest hospital system in the US. Our CSO is a leader in developing cellular technologies for immunotherapy, and our senior scientist has years of experience with our platform, end to end, from preparing experiments through to delivering results. So we're raising capital to open a dedicated lab, support the launch of new products, including an instrument disposable model. And appreciate all the time, and thank you for a wonderful event so far.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. All right, I'm going to open it up to our panelists for questions. Who's got a question? Krishna, are you looking?
Sorry, I've got one. Just curious how you got attached to this project. With the technology coming out of U of H, did you go there and seek this out, or were you approached by faculty or the Office of Tech Licensing, or how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I joined a little bit after formation. The company had 3 co-founders, 2 of whom I already knew and had been working on other projects with. And I had been looking for a company in this industry that for a business like ours, you tend to look for things like a big market need, an attractive solution, technical validation, and commercial validation. And the 5th thing that I look for is to work with people that, well, for lack of a better term, just aren't jerks. I'm far enough along in my career that I want to work with really high quality people. And so that's how I ended up at CellChorus.
Great.
Questions?
Yeah, Dan, I have a question. Can you talk about what you envision the commercial arrangements looking like with each customer, and what do you envision the most common use cases being? Is it within oncology, or is it within other types of medicine?
Yeah, so I love that question because there's a few things embedded in there that are particularly important. So I'll take them in parts. The first is on the commercial relationship with customers. I expect that we will have a fee-for-service relationship for the vast majority of customers at the beginning of the customer relationship. And that's because we're bringing new information and we are a new modality. And that's a pretty well-established model in the industry. You'll see companies that have 10, 20% or even more of their revenue in a strategic internal lab, even when they're selling a $100,000 to $1 million instrument, depending on the particular modality. So the lab that we will build initially is not only a good revenue opportunity, but it's strategic for other lines of business. So that's the first piece. On the second piece, which I think went to sort of where we're applicable, a lot of the work that the single cell lab has done is in oncology, and there's a lot of action in oncology in the market. So that will be, I expect, a majority of our revenue in the short run. But that being said, we're fundamentally a microscopy-based system. So we have broad applicability across cell types, indications, targets, et cetera. And we have some internal work that we're conducting now in order to have some proof of concept in infectious diseases. And we're talking to a very small number of new customers that are in new technology types or new indications. Frankly, we're just at capacity, so it's hard for us to sign a lot of new customers because we don't want to sign customers and not be able to deliver. But the customer conversations we are having are ones that are expansive outside of oncology, because even though there's nothing restricting the platform to oncology, it's still obviously useful to show reference customers, proof of concept, application notes, et cetera, and publications in other areas.
Hey, Dan, so what's keeping you up at night? What are you worried about in terms of execution?
It's really, we've got a lot of things moving at once, and we sort of have to sequence them to get them all in the right place. And when we open our lab, we're going to be using the same equipment, supplies, processes, in some cases, people that we're using today. So from being able to run the assays and being able to deliver for customers, that's blocking and tackling. That I worry a lot less about, particularly because we've got great members of our team to handle that. So you can keep me away from the lab, which is always valuable. So really, it's really about making sure that we sequence everything, get the right capital needs, et cetera. As it relates to new products and moving to the instrument, the components are known. So the things I worry about are timeline, bill of materials, pricing, et cetera. I'm not worried about us being able to deliver. I worry more about the business metrics around those.
You just mentioned pricing. What does unit of sale look like here? Are you working on a retainer basis? How do you price differentiate and do value-based pricing? And are there comparables for pricing for a service like this in the industry?
Yeah, so I won't just, that's probably a detailed discussion on pricing is a little better suited for a one-on-one conversation. So I won't go into exact details, but what I will say is that, first of all, our pricing on a per sample basis is mid thousands of dollars. So it's attractive pricing. We're delivering highly differentiated, high value information to customers. And this relates to our fee for service business. And then I'll move to our other product line. The types of things that define pricing are things like, are we running 3 different types of the customer's product against a single cell line? Is this going to be a 4-hour experiment or an 8-hour experiment? So there are some natural sort of matching to our costs for pricing. But in general, if anything, we're underpricing significantly today, and I'm okay with that because we want to expand, have our reference customers, et cetera. When we have not determined yet what our instrument and disposable pricing will be, and that's for 2 reasons. One, we frankly just have some work to do on that. But the second thing is that there are several levers that we have across the instruments, the disposables, and the subscription element, and so that will be an important strategic conversation that we have as a company with the board, and frankly, with some of our customers over the coming year.
What are some of the next key hires that you guys have to make, and how do you balance sort of the tech side and the clinical side over there?
Yeah, so in the lab, we need to hire people that have experience with cell culture and wide field microscopy, the types of things that there are high quality, capable folks out there. And we need to hire a key person on the informatics side in order to move to a more automated process from what we're doing today. And then a real key hire is going to be to get the first good, high quality business development person who has the right network with our customers. I think that'll frankly be the hardest hire to make. But we already have some candidates who are identified. So I'm sorry, I left off one other key hire, which is we'll need a director of engineering at one point, and we already are talking to some folks there. So it's an important hire, but I'm not worried about that hire.
I was just going to ask, can you talk some more about the competitive landscape and kind of barriers to entry?
Sure. So the competitive landscape is largely defined by technologies that are trying to provide the answers that we're providing with modalities that were designed to do other things. So as an example, we evaluate how cells perform over time. As a proxy analysis, instead of evaluating what all those cells do throughout a particular experiment, you could take single captures of different cells at different time points. It's like a pseudo-time analysis. And so a lot of our competition is modalities defined for other purposes, trying to answer the questions that we're answering. Number one. Number two, a lot of those modalities are actually highly complementary. So upstream and downstream of our analysis, there are a lot of technologies that a customer will use in their own lab or we may use in our lab for the benefit of the customer. So, if anything, I think that the companies that are the modalities that are currently competitive for us as it relates to what the customer is trying to do, we will end up making them better. And so the companies that sell those technologies are absolutely potential partners for us. I'm sorry, did that answer your question or was there a second piece?
No, it did. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, sorry, what are I haven't seen any kind of financial model. What does your revenue ramp look like over the next 5 years?
So we have not projected out 5 years, and largely because we have there's a big inflection point a couple of years from now as we move to a more productized business. So, but as we look for the next couple years, the way to think about it is that every time we add another timing setup, timing is the name of our platform, into the lab, that can support comfortably between $1 and $2 million worth of revenue. And today we're break even at a gross profit level and we're vastly underpricing and our costs are much higher than they will be. So we will be able to match our capacity in the lab by adding, another tech for every couple setups and then adding the equipment for each of those. So, I can go through one-on-one with our specific revenue projections, but we're talking about low single-digit $1 million revenue, 12 to 18 months out.
Yeah, just trying to, it's important to know that just because, to see if this is a venture backable opportunity, you've got to be able to scale very quickly. The
way that we scale exponentially is when we move our customers from that initial strategic fee-for-service business where we become central to their development and manufacturing process, and then we move them to an instrument disposable subscription model. That's where we will see an enormous inflection point and a much less linear growth.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Dan, for that great presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for all the questions.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, we have our sixth company. We've got Misha Govshatina with MacroFab. Misha, are you here?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent.
You can go ahead and start sharing your screen. Perfect.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Misha Govshatina. I'm Chief Executive Officer of MacroFab. And MacroFab has built a platform for producing electronics. We're a manufacturing platform that really takes factory capacity and turns it into a cloud service. This has been done in all walks of life. Everything we do today in our consumer world, including getting airline tickets, is now done through these aggregation platforms. But this shift hasn't happened yet with B2B segments. So we're doing this for electronics, and it's a giant industry. where we can build a very, very large business. A little bit about the team. We've known each other for a very long time, started a company called Alert Logic together here in Houston, had a great run with that company, sold it to a private equity firm. Today, the company is doing well over $140 million in revenue. So we've scaled the business at every stage of life, and all the way to $750 million enterprise value, have seen and know how to scale a business properly. And most important, have been battle tested together. We worked together all the way back to pre-Enron days. So we've been through a lot together and know how to build a resilient business that makes money. Taking a couple of steps back and just to set the stage about our industry, electronics manufacturing is a very large industry and it's highly inefficient. All of electronics manufacturing, and I'm talking about everything including consumer electronics, everything you use in your daily life, is actually a $500 billion market. Our focus is more on the mid-volume segment of that. So this is electronics that's in industrial technologies, medical, aerospace, and defense. So usually the volumes are smaller, and that gets produced in anywhere between North America to Asia and all over the world. The market is about $156 billion worldwide. It's $80 billion in North America. So it's a very large market in which to operate. Industry average net promoter score is -3, so it's a really uniquely miserable industry. Part of the problem is that customers are tightly coupled to their factory. So if you are in a factory and a bigger customer chews up all the production space, you're getting a bad experience. And that's why a lot of our customers really love the MacroFab experience. Our net promoter score is 75. They get instant pricing, one-click orders. They get to see where their orders are. But most important, they're decoupled from the physical factory floor. So if it needs to go to Mexico for high volume, it goes to Mexico. If it's a low volume job, it stays in the United States. Our platform is driven by algorithms, and these algorithms drive everything from setting pricing levels to choosing which factory will produce that job. So we know about what kind of machines each factory has, quality rating capabilities, product mix. Quality is most important, right? That's one of the things that we actually inspect all of the product on. So we ship the materials to our factories. They ship us back assembled product. We then deliver it to a customer. But the experience for customers is digital. And in fact, when they design their products, they can upload them to our platform, get an instant price quote, place that order online, and then our platform will take care of execution of that job. It will place it in the right factory. For example, not all customers will be placed in all factories. We have customers with specialized requirements. In network effects allow us to choose out of 75 factories that we have in North America, just the right factory for their specific job, right? As I mentioned, MacroFab is a managed marketplace. So we package the materials, we drop ship them into the factory, they bring back product to us, we ultimately deliver it to a customer after it passes the final inspection check. Had a breakout year last year in terms of bookings. We have been on a 3-year journey now to move into the enterprise segment. So a lot of our customers find us through self-service channels. So these are engineers at some of the coolest companies out there. We have Tesla, Relativity Space, Ready Robotics, Amazon, Google engineers building prototypes through us. That essentially gives us product qualified leads. It gives us option value to go upsell those customers. We are right now focused on the industrial, manufacturing, and energy segments. Those are uniquely underserved by large manufacturers. Usually these are critical manufacturing jobs, but they're also not large enough for somebody like Flex or Foxconn to do a good job with. They're also better done in North America as opposed to China. So based on that, we have customers that have scaled all the way from a couple of $1,000s to $50,000 to $100,000, all the way into millions of dollars in contracts. So we started booking major deals over the last couple of years, well in excess of $2 to $3 million, right? So at this point, we did about $33 million in bookings last year. Gross revenue was $11 million, and we have a big year ahead of us as we convert those production customers into revenue. So that's our story. I'd love to take any questions you guys have.
All right, panel, any questions for Misha?
Hey, Misha. Nice to see you again.
How are you?
Very good. Can you explain for us the gross versus net revenue and how that figures into your business model, please?
Yes, we take a 24% net revenue take from each gross dollar of product that we produce. So because we're in a materials flow, we recognize the gross value of the transaction, and net revenue for us is what we keep after materials markup and marketplace take rates, which could be anywhere between 25 and 35%.
Misha, can you tell us a little bit about the competition?
Yes, this is a very vibrant space, and it's growing literally by the quarter. The most traditional competition are traditional manufacturers. So these are companies like Flex and Foxconn. You know, there's billions of dollars flowing through these companies, but digital manufacturing is new. The most successful marketplaces, and we are a marketplace out there, are focused on mechanical parts. These are companies like Xometry, which will go public this year. There's a company called Protolabs that's not a marketplace, but they acquired 3D Hubs, which is a marketplace. So a lot of our competition comes from companies that are digitizing manufacturing, but ultimately we're one of the very few companies that does electronics manufacturing in a marketplace setting. So digital experience for electronics we're one of the few companies that does that. The only two companies that are doing something remotely similar to ours is Tempo Automation, and they own a single factory in San Francisco of all places. So some of the most expensive real estate on earth, and that's not a marketplace, and they have a single factory. You know, we can go to millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of units. Tempo can only build less than 1,000 unit prototypes. So it's a very different go-to-market motion in a range of business that we can transact. So I would say they're the most direct competition to us. And if anybody can pivot into a marketplace model, I think it's Tempo. They've raised $75 million, but ultimately we're well ahead on our marketplace journey, about 3 years in now, and have customers that are trusting us with very large contracts.
Got it. Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit about how your customers break down in terms of, you know, within those revenue stacks, the sizes, and how you expect that to change over the next few years?
Yeah, so we acquire our customers at the engineering stage, and I actually saw a pitch from Spark Biomedical earlier. One of the engineering companies they mentioned is a customer of ours, right? So we acquire a lot of engineering prototypes. We shipped prototypes to probably 1,200 customers last year. And that business for us is about 15% of the overall bookings and revenue mix. Ultimately, most of our revenue comes from production customers. And these are customers that are either launching their products or they're in production and they're just not going to scale up to, you know, really the limit for us is $5 million per product. And usually that's too small for even Flex. Flex is looking for customers that are doing $7, $8, $10 million. Foxconn, they're looking for $100 million a year customers. So out of the $33 million that we booked last year, 5.5 was self-service that required no sales interaction. Another $10 million was done through transactional deals, and those were inside sales driven. So we reach out to these customers and we upsell them into larger deals. And then there is a handful of larger enterprise deals where it's multi-year contracts. And they're literally, you know, some of these largest customers are moving production to us from China or Turkey or other parts of Asia.
Can you tell us a bit about your factory retention rate? Your deck covered your repeat customers, but tell us how you retain factories.
You're talking about on the supply side?
Yeah.
We have 75 factories currently. We have managed out of our marketplace 3 of them so far, and that's part of the model, right? When you're with a factory, they usually do a good job for you at the beginning, and then they start slipping, and eventually you end up firing them. For a customer, that could be a 3-year journey. We use software for that, right? So we measure quality for each factory. And ultimately, if we start to see that they're slipping in their quality, and we catch that before we deliver it to a customer, right? So ideally, our QA team will notice that something's wrong with the order and we'll ship it back to the factory in order to get it fixed. A couple of broken orders from a factory, and we will start to limit their ability to take jobs. And ultimately, if they can get their act together, we'll push them out of the marketplace. So ultimately, the network effects accrue to the customer, right? They don't really care which factory it's in. They just want a job done right every time. So we use software to manage the quality flow, and ultimately bad actors are managed out of it.
And in terms of their revenue, how much are you helping them generate? Are you a significant portion? Or are you just like overflow for these factories?
For some, ideally we're overflow for these factories, right? And ideally they're taking incremental jobs. And think about it this way, each factory on average is only about 63% utilized. So there's a lot of stranded capacity there. They're struggling to get the incremental dollar of revenue, and it literally becomes contribution margin for them because they already have the machines, they already have the people, so they burn that fixed resource capacity unless they put something into it. So essentially, they sell us their factory time at a discount, and we pass it on to customers. And customers don't see a delta between what we charge them and what a typical manufacturer might charge them, because ultimately it's underwritten by the factory. There are probably 3 factories which realized that we're an interesting customer, so they come into the marketplace every single day, and we've actually had to throttle them back because they're slurping up all the jobs, which is that's not healthy behavior. We want plenty of liquidity. We want these factories to always be engaged with us. So out of 75 factories, 40% of them are engaged at various times. Sometimes they get busy and they don't need anything, right? So we really want to maintain that ratio as we scale up. We're going to acquire more factories to keep plenty of capacity in the network.
Can you talk about retention on the demand side? As people get bigger, are they tempted to go and find the Flexes of the world to move on and so on? So, obviously those productions are the ones that are the big dollars, like you pointed out. So what makes it sticky with you?
It doesn't happen until about a $5 million level, right? So we haven't really lost a customer to a large manufacturer yet. The more you gravitate away from $5 million, and that's not per customer, that's per product, right? So Immersion just signed their first production deal with us, and it's only about $100,000 for a very important product for them, but $100,000 isn't going to move the needle with Flex or Foxconn. So Immersion, their entire product catalog for us is a massive opportunity, but it's actually a giant headache for somebody like Flex or Foxconn. But if there is a hit and the product like Fitbit is doing millions of dollars in production per year, somebody's going to offer them a lower priced production model than we do. And that's just a business model choice. We choose not to extend ourselves into lower margin sales. So we expect that we will lose customers to go supernova and get into $10 million per product. So that's the natural limit for us, $5 million per product per customer.
Hey, Misha, question on how you guys source your materials. Have you ever run into issues with that, given perhaps the size of the manufacturing orders that you guys are piecing together? And have you found that you're able to always compete both on speed and quality, or has there ever been, an order where you guys might take a little bit longer due to where you're sourcing materials or that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that's a fact of life today. I just heard a story at NPR. Ford is cutting back production of F-150s, which is their most profitable truck, because conductor industry is struggling. That affects, if Ford is cutting back production, supply chain is constrained for everybody. So supply chain people know that when the supply chain gets constrained, everybody's going to feel that pain. And that's actually part of what our platform does really well, is that we choose a factory that has floor capacity to build that job. But if the job runs late because supply chain was constrained and we weren't able to source the materials on time, we actually reschedule it on a different factory floor. It is way less than graceful in a traditional model. When you're with a single manufacturer, you miss your production window because some component was late, and you may have to go to the back of the line and wait even longer. So really treating factory capacity as a commodity resource and being able to reschedule these jobs across a very large fabric, that's a very well understood model for cloud computing, and it's unheard of essentially in manufacturing, right? Apple gets to tell Foxconn to use multiple factories and rebalance their capacity between China and in India. But anybody smaller than that really doesn't. So people are dealing with fixed capacity, and supply chain constraints are going to happen. These are factual, and that's part of what we offer to our customers, is that you're not fixed to any one factory. So when there is some kind of a unusual event, we will always be able to reroute you to get to the fastest factory time we can.
Okay, but I mean, you guys don't keep any inventory or anything like that, right, on the materials side?
Some, usually we do 6.5 inventory turns per year. So for some customers that are on the contract, we will actually buy inventory ahead and keep it on our books. But a lot of that inventory is vendor managed. And what that means is we will commit to distribution that we're going to buy a certain amount. They keep it on their shelves. And customers ultimately, when they sign multi-year production deals, they're responsible for whatever inventory we source on their behalf. So that's contractual. They're contractually obligated to buy it, even if it doesn't go into production.
Okay, thank you.
We just get one last question in on what's the valuation of your current round. I saw you've got a lead identified, so you've got a term sheet. What's the valuation setup?
Yeah, we're doing an A1 round. It's led by ATX Venture Partners out of Austin, obviously. There is $2 million out of 5 committed from ATX on that round. 1 million soft circled from Wavemaker Partners, and that's a new investor, and they've done their own diligence, including customer calls with us. So there's 2 available. We can extend it further if we need to, and it's priced at a $35 million pre.
Okay, thank you.
And on a run rate basis, that's about a just over 2x multiple on gross run rate and just over 8x multiple on net revenue run rate for Q1.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you,
Congrats.
Misha.
Thank you. Enjoy.
All right.
Afternoon.
Have a good one. Next up, we've got Chris Buckner from Mainline. This is our final presentation for the afternoon and our wild card. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for having me. Hopefully I don't mess up like yesterday when it comes to presenting my screen. All right, can everybody see esports tournament software there?
We can see it.
Perfect. So I'd like to say, I don't know how you're supposed to follow up those kinds of companies, esports, saving lives, but whoever said saving the best for last obviously kind of made that up. But I do want to say thank you all so much for having me. And it's Friday, let's have some fun with it. So before we get started, you probably see esports. For those of you who might be a little bit new, esports just means competitive gaming. That might sound silly, but it is a real thing now. Your kids, if you got them, they can go to college on scholarships now for competitive gaming. And you might see the charges on your credit card for Fortnite too, if you have kids. So it's a real thing. And it is our job at Mainline to provide colleges, universities, and brands with the ability to run tournaments and kind of grow that atmosphere. So with that, getting right in, hopefully y'all can see the market and opportunity slide. You'll see that gaming is a $160 billion industry. This is where you see those microtransactions, in this space on your credit cards, kids spending a lot of money getting different jerseys and such. The professional esports industry is a $1 billion industry led by sponsorship and advertising. But the amateur esports industry is really untapped, and that's where we are really focused right now. You'll see there a TAM of $2 billion led by our licensing, sponsorship, revenue, subscriptions, and data. The opportunity in the space is massive. And obviously, for better, for worse, COVID has been, obviously, it's bittersweet. It's been very, very helpful to us because people are looking for a different solution to traditional sports. And as you'll see here, Mainline is already the most used collegiate esports software for media rights owners in the space. So what does our company do? What is our model? So as you'll see here, we are a licensed tournament software. We do have ARR. We license on a semesterly basis to our colleges. We do sponsorship rev share as well for national sponsors. We do have a remote broadcast and production arm of the company, which has been really important during the coronavirus. And then we do have the ability to be data and licensing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. We will be the largest data aggregator in the space. But most importantly, our product adoption, you'll see over the last year or so, we've started growing really quickly, grabbing a considerable chunk of the market already through our multimedia rights partnerships. And going into Q2, 527 schools through those rights and 34 conferences will have the ability to be using the Mainline software. So what does that mean when I say using the Mainline software? Our software is a white label tournament software solution where these schools, whether in high school, college, or brands, can white label and own their own version of our technology so that they have new inventory. But most importantly, they're able to run sanctioned esports tournaments for the first time that mirrors the brands of the schools with maybe the publishers and the developers of the titles that you know. We are an extremely scalable solution, able to onboard hundreds and hundreds of schools extremely quickly. We're very flexible. We do support most, if not all, formats of tournament play. Obviously, that changes on a day-to-day basis given new games that come out. As I mentioned before, we will be probably the largest collegiate tournament aggregator when it comes to like official gameplay. And our competitive advantage, I mean, we were really the only group that was able to do it with the speed, the scalability, the staff of running these tournaments. And on the right-hand side, we partnered with EA Sports to run the official Madden Collegiate Esports League and our biggest partner, Learfield IMG. We run Big 12 tournaments as well, as you see kind of behind there. But really what makes us special is how fast we can scale this up and the fact that it gives these schools the ability to have an sanctioned esports tournaments right now. I know that this is a lot of text, but this is really what's made our engine, run is our team. Shout out to all the Mainline people who are watching right now. A lot of our staff and team is watching. I come from a background in the startup space, started my first company in 2014. Oddly enough, it was in sports social media. So my first contract was with IMG in the media rights space. So I had experience there. David Stagg came from Home Depot and Blinds, doing a lot of their design work and that team. Nick, our CFO, Keith, our Chief Operations Officer, but Toby coming on board from a chief growth perspective, his background with Academy Sports and Outdoors. And then as you can see, a lot of these pro and semi-pro sports leagues really open the door for these relationships with the media rights holders in the collegiate space and kind of made our mark. So he's been a great addition. And then Billy was essentially the person that was running a lot of the Blizzard Activision collegiate titles, the collegiate tournaments in that space. And he's really the subject matter expert. If you ask anybody in the space, who do you go to run collegiate esports tournaments? Billy Sprout's name is going to come up. So we're very fortunate to have him. And with that, I want to say thank you again for letting me be a part of this and open it up for questions.
All right, panelists, questions for Chris.
And Chris, what kind of a revenue traction do you have? I know you saw a lot of deals. Did I miss this as to what was the nature of the revenue traction here that corresponds to?
Sure. So the way that we do our revenue stream right now is the schools license our software on a semesterly basis. And the way that they do this is by tournament. So if a school wants to run a single elimination tournament at their school, it's a $2,500 licensing fee. Now, if they want to run additional tournaments or if they want to run expanded formats, for instance, double elimination, Swiss, round robin, if they want to run more than one game title, at that point, we charge more on a licensing basis. And then we do have remote production capabilities, which, for instance, in the Learfield IMG schools, we'll have 100 of their properties individually using our software this spring. And they're guesstimating that about 50% of those universities will need our remote broadcast capabilities. And we have two different levels, half day cost, which is $3,000, and full day cost, which is $6,000. So those are the primary focuses of our company. We are a product company first and foremost. Then we do take a rev share on national sales deals with our media rights partners. And then lastly, we are looking for strategic partners right now because as we start to aggregate all this data, we actually just had our first group come and license that data from us for content reasons. So we have a really big opportunity there.
So Chris, how much of your revenue, how much is custom work that you do for these big tournaments?
It's a great question. So we have a very strict onboarding process. Once the onboarding is done, which can take as little as an hour if we have all the brand standards, that's from a conference level. Schools can be even quicker than that. Once the onboarding has happened, there's no real customization beyond that point. Sure, do we do administration and do we handle, the Discord chat, what we call conflict resolution, any of those things? Yes, that's a big part of it because that's how we got in, is we handle the end-to-end execution, which meant a lot of white gloving. But right now, our margins are probably around the 50% on our software. But the whole purpose of everything we've been doing is to be the backbone software of every single college in the United States. And we're heading that direction. And at that point, our admin portal is already built on the back end. We want to be able to provide it so that we are a SaaS platform to the schools where they can run their own tournaments. And at that point, they're putting in their own sponsors, running their own tournaments, their own formats, and the margin goes up to 90% or above.
Hey, Chris, I think it's really cool. Obviously, this is a hot area. One of the things we always look for is capital efficiency. So if I'm looking at you, if I'm reading the numbers right, it feels like you've raised 8, you're raising 10, and you've got $1 million or so of revenue last year or so. So it seems like you've had a pretty high burn and it hasn't translated or converted to sales. So maybe you could just speak to that a little
Absolutely.
bit.
I have no problem admitting that when we raised our first round, it was a $6.6 million round. We were pursuing a lot of different revenue streams, one of which was microtransactions, where we would take a percentage of microtransactions from new titles. That was a FOMO deal by our board and our investors. They would agree to that. But more importantly, we had a deal, this is probably pretty important to announce. We actually ran ESPN's Collegiate Esports Championship back in 2019. And part of our funding was to support the ongoing ESPN Collegiate Esports Championship, which was, they were bringing in hundreds of schools. We did all the broadcast and production, and a lot of our funding was going to go towards that. Well, when coronavirus came, it knocked out about 80% of their events team at ESPN. So they shut down the ESPN CEC for 2020, and we lost a significant piece of what was going to be in our revenue at that time. It was at that time, though, that we actually pivoted the company to have a core concentration on our product and start licensing to the schools. So I would say it wasn't really until about summer of 2020 when we got the first enterprise level proposal from Learfield IMG, and then we started closing the rest of the multimedia rights holders in the space that we really found our footing. Now, this year, we're expected to do on the low side 3.5 million, but on the stretch plus, you're looking at 6.5 to 7 million, of which you could probably put 60 to 70% of that as recurring revenue from the licensed software. So it definitely did take us a little bit longer than we had hoped. But now that we actually have that footing, we're moving really quickly. And with signing these new partners, our revenue is we're actually starting to meet those projections that we have during those board meetings now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
What does it look like for you after this capital raise?
Yes. So what we're doing now is we're essentially putting a moat around the collegiate market, but we're also expanding into the high school space already. So you'll start to see the news coming out in the coming months that not only do we have 85% of the Division I space, but we're going to be taking over about 50% of Division II, Division III, NAIA, and JUCO space. And then on top of that, we're going to start taking over state associations in the high school space. So that funding is to essentially support the moat that we're creating. In fact, I think it's important to share that one of our biggest competitors, who we thought was going to be a competitor in the space, actually shut down their technology and concentrated more on consulting, because they said, well, y'all already have the software side of it in the collegiate space. The ROI for us doesn't make sense from a software perspective. So maybe you guys can be our software and we can help with that. Once we have this funding round, it is quite literally, it's building that moat, securing more and more rights. We have a JV that we're going to be announcing here pretty soon that will give us actual esports rights, co-ownership of esports rights in the space. So, and then the next step beyond that is globalization. Everything that we've talked about now with that TAM has been North America only, really just here in the United States. But we have been approached by different countries that are asking, hey, can you replicate this with our college program? I'm sorry about the sirens. I'm at Montrose and Richmond, and there's a lot of them. But that's where some of our efforts might be going towards the end of the year, is starting the globalization process.
Chris, you mentioned rights. Tell us about the economics of buying these event rights.
Well, so we actually stay away from buying the rights. What we do instead, though, is so most of our partners in the multimedia rights space, they license our software. They use our software. We do handle the end-to-end execution of their tournaments in the space, whether that's at an individual school, a conference, or a league. But sometimes we will partner with certain groups that actually will give us rights in exchange for maybe a reduced fee or maybe some production efforts, and they give us a piece of that. Because right now, whether it's good or not, the collegiate space in particular, and the high school space too, is the Wild West. Everybody's trying to figure it out. So what we wanted to do was be Switzerland at first and just say, hey, we are the software that every single college uses from the back end to run their tournaments, so that in the future, let's say a publisher like Riot or Blizzard says we want to run a collegiate tournament. You guys are in every single school already. Just run our open qualifiers across the entire collegiate landscape and we'll put it into our league. They give us their IP rights from a publisher standpoint. And then obviously the MMRs give us their rights, because it's beneficial to tie the IP marks, the branding from the schools in this. The JV is a special circumstance. We're kind of giving and taking on that in order to secure and actually have some of those rights potentially in the future. So we don't pay for rights just because we know that that can get extremely expensive.
Hey, Chris, I don't know if you addressed this yesterday, but you guys are thinking expansion-wise, you would rather go global than to go up market into some type of like professional space or amateur space in the U.S.?
So yeah, I can touch on that. So we are definitely concentrating on North America. College is number one, high school is number two, just because the opportunity to take it over is right in front of us. I mean, like I said, we already have a significant market share. We are working with in the pro space, whether it's with orgs or whether it's with massive brands. I will say this: there are tons of open software systems. Faceit, Smash, Challenge, Battlefy. These are all B2C software systems that run their own leagues and tournaments. We don't want to be a competitor to a B2C. I mean, some of these groups have millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's all they've been doing in that space. The way we were able to take over was we do have a white label solution that can be white labeled really quickly, and none of them really concentrate on that. And that gave us a chance to secure those rights. So globalization is something that we are interested in because we can replicate the model that we're best at right now, which is, hey, Spain, you have the same structure of your colleges and universities. We'll come in, you give us the rights or the ability to use your rights. We'll provide you with the complete infrastructure for you to run these tournaments. And in return, you're going to grow your club programs, your varsity programs, and new revenue streams.
So Chris, talk about what are your valuation expectations for this round? And
Sure.
Also, maybe the previous question would have been, what is your biggest revenue line item for 2021, you think?
2021, so in terms of revenue, it will be the licensing by far. As far as the valuations, we have been already talking to some folks, 40 million plus on that valuation. I do think it's funny. I mean, I don't mind admitting this. Sometimes I go, I must not be telling the story right, because there's another group that does something not exactly similar to ours, but over in a different country, and they just have some of the colleges locked up and they just got $1 billion valuation. And I sit there and I go, I must not be telling the best story that I possibly can, because we are without question the largest official software system that North American colleges and universities are using as a whole. We've already been seeing and talking to a few folks about 40 million plus on the valuation for the next round. And then as far as, like you mentioned, it is going to be, the revenue is going to be coming from that. That's our concentration right now, is recurring revenue. But the data, again, is such a massive opportunity that we haven't even really dipped our toe into what level of value that could bring. Once you're able to tell a massive brand, let's just say we're working with iHeartRadio right now. If iHeartRadio wants to be able to have access to data, not the individual users' data, meaning like the stats of all the tournaments that we're running, whether it's high school or college, they're able to license that data for content, right? And we will have most of the content for the official competition play potentially running through our software. So licensing is going to be really big. Obviously, production is going to be big, but the data opportunity here is just unknown, to be honest with you. That's why we don't even include it in a lot of our projections, because we ourselves don't have the best handle yet of how we're going to value it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris.
Absolutely. I want to say thanks again. And I'm really appreciative to even be in the same room as a lot of those other companies. It was a huge honor.
We're happy to have you.
All right. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. All right. So that concludes the presentations for the first annual Venture Houston Pitch Competition. I want to thank all the companies and judges that made this event possible, as well as Brad Burke and the Rice Alliance team, as well as Houston Exponential and HX Venture Fund for helping to make this pitch competition a success. Just a reminder to the judges, please complete your scoring sheets now. If you are a prize giver, please make sure that you email me with your winner ASAP so that we can get ready to announce the prizes at 4:10. So we will be back at 4:10 to announce the 1.7 million in prizes up for grabs. Thanks, everyone.